Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar, Transitioning from Touring to Corporate, presented by Matt Mills. My name is Laura Lawrence and I am the Global Marketing Director at Harman. So just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a Q&A function where you can submit questions to the presenter and he'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our Learning Sessions workshop series on pro.harman.com. We're adding new sessions daily and have over 20 sessions scheduled for August and September, so watch for those on the calendar. And now I'd like to introduce you to Matt Mills, the presenter for today's webinar. Since 2003, Matt has been behind the lighting console for international touring artists such as Three Doors Down, Tree, Linkin Park, Mötley Crüe, and Disturbed. Matt has recently shifted to focus mainly on corporate events for Fortune 500 companies, but still maintains a few of his touring artists. Now I'll pass it over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everybody. Greetings from sunny Winter Garden, Florida. Thank you for joining me today for my discussion about how I went from a touring LD to a mostly corporate LD. For those of you that don't know me, like Laura said, my name is Matt Mills. I've toured around the world with plenty of acts: Three Doors Down, Nelly Furtado, Disturbed, Linkin Park, Mötley Crüe. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please don't hesitate to hit the chat function there. And I believe Brad is monitoring those as we go. So let's get into it. So my career path. I got started in lighting, working in nightclubs in my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida. Did that for a while and bounced around a few clubs until I moved to Orlando to open the new House of Blues at downtown Disney. That's really where I honed my lighting concert skills, because there was a different act every night, usually from a different genre. And if there wasn't a LD, I was the guy. So it was trial by fire. Shortly after that, I received an offer to be part of the opening team for a new Disney theme park called Animal Kingdom. There's a lot of things going on in Orlando at that time, and I was lucky enough to be in the area whenever it happened. So stayed around Disney for 4 years or so. Then I was working in a nightclub there at Pleasure Island called Mannequins, and we did a big redesign, and we put the very first Grand MA1 on property. Version 2.0, if you can imagine that long ago. And I learned it very well, backwards and forwards. Then I was reading PLSN or Lighting Dimensions, one of the lighting magazines, one day, and I saw a thing about Christie Lights being the first US company to heavily invest in Grand MA lighting consoles, and I knew that they had an office here in Orlando. So I went over there and chatted with them, and shortly after that, I became their quote-unquote console guy, because they were sending that console out with everybody because they had bought 90 of them. So from there, I was in the shop for about 6 months, and one of the account reps came out one day and says, "Hey, I know you know this console, but do you know how to make looks and all that? Are you actually a lighting guy?" And I said, "Yeah." Gave him a bit history of my background, and he said he had just landed the account for a band called Three Doors Down, and they were asking them to provide an LD as well. And again, trial by fire. I went out on that tour, and fortunately, I did very well and learned a lot very quickly, and things worked out. And as their popularity grew, so was the size of my rigs, and I was able to start making a name for myself in the industry because they were becoming a big band, and fortunately, I was the LD for the big band at the time. So, however, though, during my off time from touring, I was able to pick up corporate shows in town because Orlando has a ton of convention space, a ton of hotel ballrooms, and there's always stuff going on. At the time, there was more gigs than there were qualified people to do it, so I was able to fall into quite a bit of work during my downtime. Either way, it was great to be gigging, and it was a different side of the industry for me to learn, so it was nice. So a little bit about my history with Martin. I've had a long history with Martin, going all the way back to my nightclub days when I used the RoboScan 1220. A lot of you are going to have to Google what the hell that lighting fixture is, but at the time it was awesome. So, and also at the time when I was working at Christie Lights, I got to know a lot more about Martin because Christie is mostly a Martin house, and my first touring rig with Three Doors Down was Mac 500s and 600 NTs. So I got to know them very well, and they were great. And then as new fixtures would come out, I'll do my best to work them into my rigs. Mac 2000 was a game changer when those hit the scene, and as were the Aura and the Quantum Wash as well. Currently, I try to use the Viper line as much as I can. Big fan of that. And then lately, I've been learning quite a bit about the P3 system and how easy it is to integrate the Martin video elements into my rig. It's great. And what I'm really looking forward to, that I've got a ton of ideas for, is the new Aura Pixel, or PXL. I'm assuming that means pixel. I have a lot of ideas on integrating those into some corporate rigs. So it's got some pretty cool ideas for that. So why the change from touring? I had a successful touring career going, and all of a sudden I did a complete 180 and went somewhere else. It was pretty easy. I had a family. Met my wife, got married, started a family, and shifting into corporate allowed me to be home a lot more. Instead of being gone 5 to 6 weeks on tour, I was now gone for a week or two. And what was cool is, like, so my wife is a big history buff, and she likes taking the kids to museums and educating them on things such as that. And if I was going to a cool town for a week or two, let's just say like Washington, D.C., they would take full advantage of the fact that I had a hotel room, and I would just simply ask for, extra beds in the room, two beds instead of one king or queen size bed. And they would come out and they would take full advantage of the city while I'm working. And, they're great about it. They know the deal. I'm there working, but maybe sometimes we can catch a dinner or two, or sometimes not. Sometimes they'll just be enjoying the sights the entire time. So little things that help me out along the way to get to where I am. So as I said, living in Orlando, lots of convention center space, lots of ballrooms, tons of things happening year round, present time excluded, of course, but we all know what's going on with that. So when I was getting my start here in town, starting to make a name for myself, I made sure every lighting vendor in town knew who I was and my skill set. And I would even do shows even if I was not behind the desk. I had no problem going out and being an ME for somebody, or a crew chief, or hell, even just a third electrician, pulling feeder for them. So I always had the attitude of, there's something new to learn on every show, and I still hold to that to this day. And it, I don't know, I feel it's gotten me pretty far. I'm always interested in the new technology and why people are doing things a certain way, or instead of this way, do it that way. And I feel it's helped kind of self-educate me in the trade a lot better. Also, whenever I was on tour, I would invite previous corporate clients out to a show whenever I rolled through their town, and kind of a schmooze fest. They really enjoyed that, and then they always remembered me. And next time they were rolling through Orlando or something, they say, "Hey, make sure that Matt guy is on the gig again." And it was a bit of networking, and it was no problem for me just to put their name on a guest list. Worked out well. And also during that time when I was coming up and touring, that's when social media started to make its appearance. And I used to be all over social media with pictures of my work. And I would often mention, hey, just had a great run with whatever band I was with, looking forward to 3 weeks at home, looking forward to some downtime. And usually within a couple of days, one of those account reps from a local lighting shop or whatever it may be say, "Hey man, you got time off? I got this show coming up over at whatever ballroom or whatever. We could use somebody for a couple of days." That was another way for me to get some work, and again, more networking, learning more about the industry, all that good stuff. Now, speaking of social media, I used to be all over social media with pictures of my shows and pictures of the touring and all the lighting looks I made and all that. But these days, because of a lot of corporate companies require you to sign an NDA, meaning that you can't take credit for anything. Basically, you're just picking up the paycheck, which is all right, but it also kind of sucks a little bit, because I've had friends go, "Hey man, where the hell you been? Are you retired? Are you still doing shows?" Mainly because of my absence of posting any pictures of the work I've been able to do. So it's kind of a give and take situation, but it's been working out well. So where am I now? So after finishing Disturbed in early 2017, I decided to make a true attempt at going corporate. I'd saved a good amount of money because I was doing so much touring. I was just back to back to back to back. and saved up enough money just in case things didn't work out. And I purposely did not put out any feelers for any extra touring work towards the end of Disturbed there to try to jump onto another tour. I was essentially forcing myself to make a real go at corporate. And fortunately it worked out, and I was working pretty much right away in it, and just continued riding the wave of working with different people, different companies and whatnot. And one of the companies I had freelanced for during my times off from tour was Touchlight Media. And once I had the downtime from the Disturbed tour, I reconnected with those guys. And I remember, it was always a great experience. I enjoyed working with them, and they always took great care of me. So at the time, business was booming, and they were needing help. They had more gigs than they had qualified people, and fortunately, I was able to come in. And they offered me a partnership towards the end of 2017, and it's been great. This allowed me more opportunities to grow, as well as offer my clients a lot more, because we pooled our resources together, and we're able to offer our clients a whole lot more, and we can cover each other, and our clients feel fine about each of us dipping in and out of shows whenever things overlap. And it's just a good situation to be in. It's been great, but there's been a lot of new things to learn. Not only was I designing the lighting for these shows, but I was also doing quotes for the gear package, providing the labor, and providing a lot more detailed rigging info to the show venues. Whereas on tour, I would essentially send over an email of my drawing somewhat with where I want the trusses and whatnot to the touring rigger, and he would take it from there. But that's just kind of one of the differences in all that. But it's been great, lots of new things to learn, and I'm really enjoying where I'm at. So I don't know, let's talk a little bit about the differences between touring and corporate. So this is an example of my last tour, Disturbed. Concert touring, you're still doing conceptual renderings, tons of stuff we already know about. You'll provide a fairly detailed equipment list for your production manager to submit for the quotes. Once a gear contract is awarded, then you'll start the dialogue with the rental house. You'll start communicating with the people that will actually be building the rig, usually providing them with fixture information, such as fixture numbers, fixture mode information, sometimes patch information, depending on if you get an ME or crew chief that knows a console, knows how to patch. Sometimes they want to do it. Sometimes I'll provide it for them. For touring, cable is usually prepped to throw and go, to get in and get out as efficiently as possible. Like I mentioned, the touring rigger will handle all the load calculations, usually. A touring show will be an ongoing show that will continuously evolve, but for the most part, it's going to be the same package that you're going to take down the road. But there are also things to consider during that phase of it, such as we run in festivals with a completely different rig, or will you have to adjust your rig to accommodate like a smaller place, such as like Blossom, for those of you touring veterans that know that horrible place. Let's see, time code is becoming quite standard on tours now. In fact, I want to say five of my last 6 tours have been heavily time coded, which I enjoy. I like it a lot. Time code's pretty cool. Another thing is concerts usually rely a lot on follow spots. And it's another reason why I use a system called Follow Me, which I own a bunch of, any chance I can. And essentially the end result of your touring show, especially in pre-production and whatnot, you need the band to sign off on it. I mean, there would be management around trying to make their little tidbits about it. But for the most part, you're going to need that lead singer or whoever may be the quote unquote leader of the band to come out and be like, yep, this looks badass. Let's do it. So that's the touring side of it, at least my experience in it. So corporate shows, still somewhat similar. You're doing conceptual renderings. Unfortunately, those things typically change several times before the final design, and it can still change on site, and it usually does. You'll be on tons of conference calls that usually do not involve you at all, but you got to be there. You got to be the team player, just how it goes. And these shows can range, can be drastically different. You know, I'll have one week I'll have a show that's a simple 2-truss rig with, you know, maybe 24 lights on it, and then a month later I'm covering many acres with thousands of lights, you know, just spread across everywhere for a big event. Let's see, I'm still making detailed equipment lists, but like I said, usually I'm also the one providing the quote for the lighting package. We do a high volume of shows with Touchlight Media, and we are able to get great pricing through our relationships with vendors and whatnot, so we can be very competitive for the gear. So that's how that comes into play with us. Let's see, on corporate, I'm the one submitting the detailed rigging information to the hotels because they have to sign off on it, because essentially it's going in their ballroom, and there's a lot stricter limits they have on weight per point and whatnot, and usually it involves a lot more motors. To fly a simple 40-foot stick of truss, that's probably going to be 4 or 5 motors easily. Let's see. Also, another thing I'm doing is I'm often submitting a dock schedule for trucks, because sometimes on ballroom shows and whatnot, you're loading in through a kitchen, and it's very important to not get that jammed up. You have to schedule that, and even that's still going to get messed up, because the trucking guy is going to call you 5 minutes after he's supposed to be there and say, "Hey, I'm here, where are you?" So it's always a constant battle, but it's just part of it. A good way to think of doing corporate shows is it is really a lot like a one-off on a tour. And you're rarely going to be able to use your programming again. Sometimes, but you know, rarely. You know, so for this, I've built up an arsenal of fixture profiles that I make my colors, you know, all the presets I want except for position information, and I save them into embedded presets. And anytime I'm going to use, let's say, quantum wash again on the next show that's completely different than the show that I just did, I'll pull from that fixture profile that already has all my colors made that I need and whatnot. And the same thing goes for effects as well. I recycle my effects quite a bit. In corporate, cabling is very clean. Everything is very clean, but cabling is hidden as much as possible. It's got to look nice. Can't just throw it together like a concert. Concerts, like I mentioned, rely heavily on follow spots, but corporate is all about a nice, even wash for camera. I have used systems like to follow me for occasional pickups and whatnot on award nights, but for the most part, you're going to be doing a nice, even stage wash for camera, because they got to look good on camera, and they're always recording it, and they're going to make it so their company can review it at a later date. So it's always going to be there. So you got to make sure that wash is looking good, which also, it kind of goes hand in hand. You also need to be talking to the video department at the same time about light levels, about what color temperature they'd like versus what you like, and come to an agreement. And so it's really a collaboration. So it's, you know, definitely, it takes a village to make this thing happen. That's for sure. Also on touring, you often get pre-programming time, you know, pre-viz time. Usually, you know, I'll do it at my home office. I'll try to ask for a week, sometimes 2, or I start with 2, and I usually settle for 1 week. So I can, you know, get the backbone of the tour programmed in there. Corporate, completely opposite. It's rare that you're going to really even have show flow information, such as, you know, this person's coming up at this time, and their slide is going to be this color, so your lights need to either complement it or contrast it, whatever looks best. So you're rarely going to be doing any pre-programming for a corporate show. However, whenever I get in the room and the rig is being built, often I'll pull out my laptop, throw a console up on an empty case, and at that point I'll speak with the show caller or the producer, and they'll actually be able to start getting me some information so I can get a little bit ahead, and I'll kind of fire up the visualizer at that point. And it's gotten me ahead sometimes, but it helps. On corporates, time codes, it's starting to become used quite a bit more. I'm noticing a lot of the shows I'm doing, they'll have this grand entrance to kick off the whole show and all that. And I'll be able to time code that. We've kind of had to ease them into the deep end of the pool with it, but now they get it. And we'll even save examples of what we've done in the past for whoever may be a new person that they're saying, oh yeah, provide these guys some time code. So it makes it easier for us to go, here's what we did last year, here's what we need you to do. Just an example, this worked out great. Another crazy thing in corporate, your front of house is sometimes not front of house, sometimes it's side of house. So oftentimes what I'll do to combat this situation is during setup, once I'm able to build a stage wash, I will get a long Ethernet cable and wheel a console down there to the front of the stage, downstage center, and I will set up my wash at that point. And as mentioned before, on corporate things, there's lots of NDAs. You have to avoid social media with the pictures and taking credit of whatever company you may have lit and whatnot. They don't like that at all. So as I mentioned, this is a typical programming for concert touring. I'll do a song per page. It's very cue stack based. Time code is quite standard. I always have a punt page. Some bands are very structured, some are not. That's why I have up top there, you can kind of see a bank of macros that will jump to any song in case they get out of order or if they decide to skip a song or whatever. I can just, boom, hit that macro, then I'm right into it. Now, this is an example of one of my corporate shows I've done. So sometimes whenever you are in a situation where they have a show flow that is very detailed, it's very structured, I'll be able to make a show stack. And I will. I'll typically do it per day. So the orange portion in the center there, that's my stage wash. I typically use a zone coverage for my stage wash. The two faders there that are down would represent the outside edges of the stage. I try to just light essentially where they are, but if they happen to creep over that side of the stage, I'll bring that fader up. They're pretty notorious for finding any dark spot that you may have accidentally left on stage because that's more comfortable to them. So make sure you don't do that. For me, to keep things nice and fluid, I build a set of macros to actually bring up my stage wash, or go to a video look, which essentially takes all the stage wash out and dims all the scenic lighting kind of to a Congo glow, just so the attention is on the video. And then I use another macro to bring up those faders in a nice, 1 or 2 second fade. Let's see. So besides having your show programmed for your regular daytime stuff, you'll also have a party night usually. Sometimes it's off-site, sometimes it's in the same room you're in. They'll turn that room around and it becomes, essentially a disco sometimes, or sometimes there's a band. Let's see, this is an example of one of my shows that was not so structured, where essentially I used, just had a handful of looks to complement the corporate colors. They were kind of flying by the seat of their pants. There wasn't really much need for doing a cue stack. Again, I still use the zone coverage for my stage wash. I still use the macros to bring everything up and video looks and whatnot. And essentially they'd call for a CEO to come on stage. We'd play some music. I'd do a generic ballet. And then I would try to change it up, If the corporate colors looks like this one was blues and yellows, I would do a blue and yellow look. Then the next look would be yellow and blue, and then maybe be all yellow, then an all blue. Just trying to make some differences, out of what I've got available to me, color palette wise, that they're asking for. So this is an example of a party night. So what you see, the colored faders you see over on the left are my intensities for the different types of fixtures I have available to me. And then all the green highlighted cue stacks on the right are all my different stacks for different colors. Let's see, looks like different effects, different pan and tilt looks, different gobos and whatnot. And essentially what I'll do, this would be for if there was a DJ, or even if there was a band, and I would essentially put my stage wash on the band to keep them lit. And I would select all these faders. So, and I would, which even though these are Q stacks, are actually chasers, and they're set to 0 time, and they're set to go at random. So whenever I would hit the main go button, it would jump to a different pan and tilt, it would jump to a different effects, it'd jump to a different color. And so anytime, whenever I know there's a change coming up, I can just hit that go button and things would change, and it was always different, it was always interesting. And realistically, they're getting drunk and they don't necessarily care too much about how the lights are looking anyway, as long as something's happening. And I would bring in different intensities and whatnot, or, you know, I would only have the spots, or I'd only have the wash, or I'd only have the wash and some of the, like the LED strip effects going on. Just try to make it interesting, but also simple at the same time. Because like I said, like they're not too concerned with you nailing how the party night, you know, band is doing, you know. They're really more concerned about the show, and they're more concerned about getting drunk on this night. Not really going to go too much in depth with programming, because AJ Penn did a great webinar about it, and it pretty much covered everything I would explain regarding that. So I highly recommend watching it. This is a screenshot of what his webinar, so I highly recommend checking that out. And also, Benny Kirkham has one coming up on Thursday. I'm sure that webinar will be very informative as well. So I recommend that one as well, just because I'm not going to get too in depth with the programming, because AJ did an amazing job on his webinar. So let's see, what else can I tell you about the corporate stuff? Especially on the party night, you know, a lot of people come up to me, they think I'm the DJ, they'll give me a request. I usually just take them and send them on their way. Plan on a drunk CEO making their way to the stage at some point. Planning on the party going longer than scheduled. If they say it's ending at 11, more often than not, the CEO is going to go up there and stroke a check to go another couple hours, because everybody's having a great time. It's just the way it is. Also, what's fun thing about these parties is these people usually don't let loose too often, and people watching can be great. You can count on at least one person making themselves look ridiculous in front of the whole company, so that's always entertaining. Feel bad for the guy, but you know, still entertaining. Kind of reminds me of a show I did for a beer distribution company, and the previous year's party got so out of control. Unfortunately, some of the top people got let go because of how out of hand things got. So, so the next, fast forward a year later, I'm doing the same show again for them. For their party night, they had a 2-drink maximum, and the attendees were terrified to even finish one of their drinks. So it's things can be interesting to see. So after all this talk about corporate and programming and all the ridiculousness that can happen there, do I miss being on the road? Absolutely. My favorite part of the night was when I got the call from the stage manager for house lights. I make the call to the house light guy and say, go house lights. Everything goes dark, energy builds, and then you are off and running. Absolutely love that. Miss it to this day. So, but yeah, I mean, this is where I am now, and I'm loving it. So what do I do about no longer touring? Well, fortunately, last year I got a call to be the LD for Sammy Hagar. And the nice thing about Sammy is he made his money and now just plays because he wants to, not because he needs to. So it's not too much of a grueling touring schedule, and it allows me to quench my thirst for live concerts, but still gives me time to be able to do my corporate shows as well. What's funny is doing concerts keeps my memory fresh of all the different characters you'll meet at concerts and the differences of the ones you'll see at corporate shows. It is definitely a different cast of characters. So these two pictures could not be more true. Rock and roll stagehands are very much pirates. They're awesome, but they get the job done quickly and efficiently. Probably will go to the gig wearing whatever they had on last night at the bar, and they'll definitely gladly fight you. I would, for the corporate stagehands, I'd kind of compare them to the Geek Squad from Best Buy. Don't get me wrong, they know their craft. They're very polite, but sometimes they're a little hard to get going because they're afraid to do something wrong as opposed to just jumping in there and making stuff happen. They will be very well dressed, almost like they're ready to go to the office. And again, like I said, they're very polite, but they're also easily offended. So you can't come in with your regular rock and roll speak that you give to the pirates there. You kind of got to be a bit more polite with them. And like I said, all great people, but just differences and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to do our gigs and get home. So then there's this guy. For those of you not familiar with this guy, he is Dwight from the US version of The Office. He's essentially the corporate kiss-ass guy trying to make his way up the ladder. He's the savior of the show. Just ask him. He'll tell everybody. You'll hear him talking about it all night long. So no matter how perfect you have everything set up, he is going to find something wrong just to prove his worth. So what I do, I give him something. If the corporate colors are blue, maybe I'll make them lavender. So he'll come to me and be like, "Oh, you got to change this immediately. This is wrong. This is wrong." And that way, he'll get everybody's way, and we can actually get things done. I remember I had a guy that insisted that the company colors were wrong, even though I knew they were dead on. So I politely let him do it. He's like, "What do you mean?" So I selected the fixtures, I brought up the color picker on the console, and I showed him how it worked, and showed him that he was able to do it. And he was, first off, of course, anybody that sees the new color picker for the first time, they're running their finger all over the place. "Whoa, this is neat. This is all you guys do?" But eventually, he went essentially to the same exact color that I had made anyway. And he said, this is how it should be. I'm like, "Oh, you're right, sir. That's perfect. Let's save that to this button right here, and it will be there forever and ever." And again, he felt like he saved the show, and he was off to harass other people. Sometimes there's more than just one. Sometimes there's like a whole committee of people that have their own opinion of how things should look, and it's just all over the place. Navigating that can be pretty tricky, but you just kind of got to keep everybody happy. I remember we did this massive show spread across. The show was so big, I could be at one console at one end of it, and I couldn't even see the light I was bringing up on the other end. So it was a pretty high stress gig, lots of opinions. We had to make everybody happy. So comes night for the walkthrough, and we were a bit nervous. "Oh God, I hope they like it. We've been hard at it and all that." And the interesting thing was, out of nowhere, everything was fine. And they go, "You know what would really make this event really happen? Bubbles. We need bubbles everywhere." So, granted that's not lighting, but, sure enough, we had to produce 10 huge bubble machines that basically just vomited bubbles all over this whole place. And we made that happen overnight. But these are some of the things you'll run into. And yes, the bubbles actually did end up looking pretty cool, sadly to admit. So, but I don't know, let me give you an example of our workflow. So, like I said, you'll be on plenty of calls and Zoom meetings discussing what the show actually is and what's expected and whatnot. And once that is somewhat settled in, I'll get the client's version of the drawings, which is usually a DWG, and I'll take that and bring it into Vectorworks so we can actually do our drawing. And I'll create a shareable folder with the client with the DWG in there and a Vectorworks file which is referencing our drawing, but we give them their own area to draw if they do use Vectorworks. So they can make their changes, whether it be moving tables around or moving the stage to the complete opposite end of the room, whatever it may be. So that way we can just simply refresh and see what they're up to, and so we can try to stay on top of it as good as possible. Then we do our work in Vectorworks, and once we've got our lighting set and we figured out our wash and whatnot and what we can use with the budget that we have, we will kick it over to Lightright. Essentially in Vectorworks, I'll just give it fixture numbers or channels in Vectorworks. Then I'll kick it over to Lightright, which is great for patching and circuiting and power calculations. And it also does amazing paperwork as well. And from there, I will then port it back into Vectorworks to bring all that information into Vectorworks. And then, out of Vectorworks, I'll kick it into lightning tapes to make my truss tapes, because in corporate, 90% of the times, you're not going to be able to hang this rig in a pre-rigged truss, so you're building it on site and making the pretty picture on the lightning tape there for all the stagehands to see. Oh, look, a Viper goes here. Oh, and it's number 107. Oh, it goes right here. You know, very easy. Try to keep it as easy as possible to make things as efficiently as possible. And then from there, we also make PDFs to print out the plots. I will export the patch and 3D fixture information into the MA2. And from there, I will export it into L8 for previs, if previs is available, and also make renders out of that. And also take those 3D coordinates from the Vectorworks information and drag that into Follow Me if we're using that into on a show as well, just to keep things a lot easier. So that being said, that is our workflow, and like I said, it's, you know, it is always evolving. There's a good chance that we will be evolving this to include GDTF and MVR. I recently saw a great webinar the other day by my friend Matt Geezy explaining this. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check it out. I think that this may be a path that a lot of us are going to jump onto in the future. So it was pretty neat what I saw. I need to get my head around it a bit more, but certainly looking forward to it. So on tours, I would typically have, you know, typically my crew chief, master electrician, whoever it may be, they've got all the tools we need to make stuff happen. And generally, we do on corporate shows as well. During prep, we'll load up a workbox of what we need and all that. However, I'm still bringing stuff to the show in basically in a Pelican 1510 rolling workbox that has my laptop in it. You know, I'm bringing truss tools. Not that I ever plan on having to use them, but man, if those truss tools get lost on a loadout, I'd rather have them than not have them. Some of the other things I bring, or some of the tools of the trade, so to say, I use a light meter. The new one I'm using now is called Lumu. It's really cool. It just hooks up to my iPhone, and it's I put it up against some pretty expensive light meters, and it holds its own against them. And it's, I think I paid $300 for it. It was relatively inexpensive. And whenever you're on stage using that, a lot of times the client will come up to you and goes, You're using your phone to get that data? I'm like, yes, I am, which is kind of an icebreaker to get some dialogue going with you know, important people of the company or whatever you want to call it. You know, I use that to set my color temperature and foot candles. Like I said, corporate is all about a nice even stage wash for cameras. But on tour, I would use a light meter to make all the house spots equal. So you know, it comes in handy on both sides of the fence there. I bring a DMX cat with me. It's a great little tool that you can essentially plug into the DMX line that has whatever fixture you may need to manipulate, as long as it has RDM. Works great. That's actually replaced my DMXer I used to carry. The printer there, I don't bring that with me, but that's the thermal printer I use for the truss tapes. The thing with all the buttons on it, that's called an Elgato Stream Deck. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife of geeking out on stuff, and it talks to lighting consoles, and I'll use it on smaller shows. For example, like if I have a show that the budget doesn't really allow for the console size I want, or that I'm more comfortable with, and if I have to use like a computer version of the console or whatnot, I can load that thing up with different buttons, different valleys, different colors, whatever I need it to do. And it works out really well. And again, I could throw it right there in my toolbox, and it's great. As mentioned before, use Vectorworks, Lightright, L8, and lightning tapes. That other symbol there, that's Razor, which if anybody that really knows me would probably be pretty surprised to see that. I actually made the change from Mac to PC last year. I bought a Razor, and I'm very happy with it. Often, like I said, I will often set up a desk in the ballroom and try to do some pre-viz work when I can, and the Razor can definitely handle it. Yeah, let's see. I guess that's about it. I keep the usual stuff: electrical meter, wrench, knife, sharpies, truss tools, 3 to 5 turnarounds, terminators, all that stuff's in my work box. And 99.999% of the time, most of those tools aren't used, but they're there in case something goes wrong and we need them quickly. So I don't know. My advice of a little bit of advice: enjoy the ride. What a great profession we work in, where we get paid to travel and see the world, both touring and corporate. During my years in the industry, I've learned that I found more happiness from experiences than actual buying material things. Besides, you know what the inside of a hotel room looks like. Get out and go for a walk. Like still to this day, I can see it in my mind right now, clipping into the safety wire at the Sydney Harbor Bridge, or I can still taste the best burger in the world, the White Lady in New Zealand. I still remember watching a sunset on top of Table Mountain in South Africa, and I'm not one to sit long enough to watch a sunset. If you're lucky enough to go through Europe, tons of history. It's absolutely amazing. Japan, the electronics district, and what I really remember about Japan is I ate raw horse, and it was delicious. Yeah, raw horse. But I don't know. Hopefully, we can all get back to work soon. And during the downtime, I've been trying to keep myself busy. So January, we bought a ton of Follow Me 3D systems. So I've been building those. So hopefully we'll get back working and get those out there. As I mentioned, I use L8. I've recently bought a license a few months ago, and it's going really well. It's got a nice exporter from Vectorworks into L8, and I'm pretty impressed with it so far. Also during the time, I took advantage of some of the deals that Disguise was putting out there for their dongles and whatnot and all their learning courses. And we learned Disguise XR, which is another service that Touchlight Media is providing our clients. Caught up with all the car maintenance I've put off for way too long. You're home for a couple of weeks, like, I'll get to that next time I'm home. And fast forward 2 years, it still hasn't been done. So finally caught up on all that. My yard has never looked better. And the silver lining in all this is being able to spend this time with my family, because this is normally time when I'm just balls to the wall with corporate stuff and I get to see them, just here and there. But it's been a hell of a summer for enjoying time with the family. And speaking of family, I'd like to give credit to my son. I'm a firm believer of giving credit where credit is due. This is my 12-year-old son. He helped me out with this because he has a lot more experience in PowerPoint than I do. He has to do that for all his school projects and whatnot, which is another example of hiring the right person for the right job, which I do nowadays on corporate shows. So that about wraps it up, everybody. I'd like to thank Martin for inviting me to do this, and I certainly want to thank everybody for watching. If there's anything I may have breezed over too quickly, or if I left anything out, please feel free to ask questions. You can either type them in the chat area, and I think Brad will get them to me, or if you'd rather email me direct, that's fine as well. Here's my information, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We do have some questions that came in the Q&A if you have a few more minutes.
Absolutely.
Perfect. The first question is, what measurement tools and such do you use to measure your perfect camera level stage washes?
Well, I use the Lumu light meter, which connects to my iPhone, and it does very well. Typically, I try to do around 5,000 Kelvin, but I also talk with the video guy. Like most of the video guys I work with, they seem to like around 5,000 because it still gives them the ability to add red into it to give it a little more warmth. If it wasn't going on camera, I would shoot more towards a tungsten level around the 3,200 range. And I try to hit 100-foot candles, but whenever we are doing our chip chart and whatnot, the majority of people in the industry knows this trick already. You never want to give them everything all at the same time. So I typically back that off to around 70% and let them ask for more if they need it. And I have it there if it's needed.
Okay, great. Next question. What were the 2 webinars on console programming that you mentioned?
Oh, that was, they're both Martin webinars that you can find. The first one I mentioned was AJ Penn, who goes very, very in depth with how people are programming the MA these days. I watched his webinar and I didn't want to go too in depth with my programming methods because they're very, very similar to AJ's, and I just feel like I would be rehashing the same thing he had just mentioned. So definitely AJ Penn. It's called something like the show kernel or something. He's got some hippy dippy name for it. If you know AJ, that's how he is. But it's all good. But and then there's one coming up, I believe, this Thursday by Benny Kirkham, who is also an awesome programmer. So I'm definitely going to tune in for that one, and I recommend that one as well.
I'm actually going to put the link up into the chat box for everyone to the sessions that we have recorded so that you can find the AJ Penn session that Matt just mentioned. And all upcoming sessions will be out on that playlist as well. So if you go to the chat box, that's listed there. Next question. Have you ever done any esports or gaming gigs? What is your advice for this? Tips and tricks? Is it more corporate or more concert?
So for esports, I have done one. I would recommend, it's really a mixture of both, whereas you're going to have the really cool lighting effects like you would for a concert or even really more kind of like an EDM show, but you're going to need to light the people that are playing the game as well because they are going to be on camera, and that can be tricky as well because the contestants, they need to be able to see the screen that they're playing on without being bombarded with lights that are distracting them. So it can be a bit tricky, and you're going to want to play with different angles. You're going to want to have a lot of options available to you. And they're still going to complain about it because it's not the same lighting as in their mom's basement.
All right, next question. What is your best advice for folks that want to get more into corporate work? Shops, vendors, how would you reach out to them?
I would probably go with shops. Basically, like as mentioned earlier, I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. I was doing a lot of lighting in that town, but it was all small nightclub work and all that. And I purposely moved to Orlando simply because I knew there was a ton of entertainment going on. So I put myself in that environment so I could pick up the crumbs, essentially, that other bigger LDs or whatever you would like to call it. They were on the big shows. I was picking up the crumbs, learning as I went. And that is, essentially how I worked my way up, is learning on the job. And then just other ethical skills, like be 10 minutes early. Don't be the guy that's a pain in the ass. Be the guy that wants to stay late. Never be the guy that's there, as soon as the load in starts, is asking, hey, when is this all going to be done? Well, it's going to be done whenever it's done. So I would hit up lighting companies simply because, like rental houses, simply because they're going to need people to take their stuff out and make sure that it works right and comes back, in one piece. So, as I mentioned before, I would do a lot of shows, even though my talents are truly behind the console, I still know every aspect of hooking up a rig. So I would go out as an ME or I'd go out as an electrician. I would just do anything I could to get myself noticed and get my foot in the door. And it's a small industry. A lot of people talk. It's very, I don't want to say it's easy to get recognized, but it's not the most difficult thing in the world either, in my opinion, at least.
All right, next question. Everyone says that corporate pays better than touring. Have you found this to be true?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that you're getting a day rate, and it's usually a very healthy day rate. Whereas on tour, you are getting a weekly salary. So now a tour can pay you handsomely every week for, let's just say, a 5-week run. You're getting 5 weeks of that really, fairly decent rate, and it's continuous. Whereas corporate, it could be 1 week this month, no weeks next month, or sometimes it could just be, 1 week this month and then the entire next month. Sometimes you're searching for days off. It can be very seasonal, but yes, corporate does pay more, but it's not as continuous as touring. Whereas If you jump on a tour, you'll know that the album cycle is going to go for, let's just say, 18 months. So in your head, you can kind of budget and say, okay, I know that I've got, unless something goes wrong, of course, I know I've got work for the next year and a half. Whereas corporate, it's like I said, it's a series of one-offs. So it takes a little while to build up the repeat customers, so to say.
Next question is asking, is there anything you wish you would have done differently when coming up through the industry?
It's tough to say because when I was coming up through the industry, I didn't have the resources available to me that are available now. There was no YouTube. Like my first lighting rig was an IntelliBeam controller with a joystick and an emulator controller with a joystick. And I had to call the lighting company, say, hey, will you please sell me a manual so I can learn how to do this? There was no jumping on YouTube and learning about it. So it's difficult to say if I'd do things differently because I'm really happy with everything that I've done. I mean, sure, I look back at some of the DVDs I've done with bands and I'm like, ew, that looks horrible, just because my skills have progressed. But you can't look at that stuff. You just got to keep moving forward. But I'm fairly happy with the way things have worked out, really. I'm fortunate to say I haven't really had too many negative experiences that would make me, not want to do it again.
All right, next question. What is your best advice for programmers looking to take their skills to the next level? Say you've toured as an LD, programmed your own shows, but want to move into a world where others hire you to program for them. It's a big jump. Any advice?
I would email designers directly, actually. Like if you know that this designer is on the up and up, if this guy's, about to really blow up, there's going to come a time when as a designer, you're going to be doing more dealing with the artist than you will be behind the console. And they need people that they can rely on to program their show. If they can kind of give them an idea of what they want per song and leave them alone and let them do it, as well as take it down the road. So you could end up being the programmer and the lighting director and go down the road with it, which will put you in front of a whole lot more other production people that you'll get to know, which will then roll into other shows and whatnot. And, eventually you'll get tapped to be a designer for maybe an opening band that has a couple songs that have finally blown up on radio. And now they're doing their own headlining tour. It's a bit of a progression that way.
Okay, next question. As a designer in corporate events, how much input do you have to the look of the video imagery? Do you have more input when designing concerts?
Yes, exactly. Usually I have zero input on the video. The video is typically handled by some firm that they paid way too much money to that don't want to listen to the video people that are actually going to be running it, that they need to make their file size smaller or it's going to choke the server. So yeah, typically I have zero input on video, whereas it's the complete opposite usually on tours where whenever I'm the designer, I can completely say, for this song, I'm seeing, let's say, a fire look, and then I can, if we have a content creator, I can relay that to them. Or if sometimes it'll be me because I don't have the budget to pay a content creator, then I'll go to my terabytes of content I've saved throughout the years.
All right, we have another question. How do you interact differently with corporate clients versus band members?
Band members, a lot of times it really depends on the artist and the ego they bring with them. But most of the bands I've worked with, they've always been people that will gladly have a beer with you. Corporate executives and whatnot, they typically have what we refer to as their handlers, just kind of an assistant that's with them. That's usually who you're interacting with. But sometimes there's some really cool CEOs of companies that will roll in, and a lot of them even remember everybody's name from previous years. It wouldn't surprise me for a certain organization I do shows for. CEO comes walking in and he's pointing at me behind front of the house. He's like, "Hey Matt, how you been, man? I haven't seen you in a year. Looking forward to it." So it's all over the place, but typically on corporate there, you're not going to be directly speaking with the important CEOs and whatnot. You'll be dealing with their assistants, their handlers, so to say.
All right, wonderful. It looks like that was the last question that came in. As Matt mentioned, his contact information is up on the screen if you do have additional questions. It sounds like he's open to having people reach out to him directly. So thank you for that, Matt. And thank you for the presentation. We really appreciate your time. This is a great session. And to the attendees, thank you as always for joining us today. If you're interested in upcoming sessions, you can go out to pro.harman.com and see the full calendar. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have over 20 sessions scheduled right now for August and September, and soon we'll be posting our October sessions as well. So thank you for joining us, and everyone have a great day. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.